What was the biggest bullet you dodged? In 1992, I was 16. A bunch of us were about to leave a party and I called shotgun. But my friend Pat kind of wrestled me out of the spot and I wound up jumping in another car since the first car was now full. The other driver and I watched as our friend's car skidded into oncoming traffic. Pat was airlifted to the local trauma hospital where his dad told a huge group of us teenagers that Pat had succumbed to his injuries. Maybe that's not exactly bullet dodged, but Pat's driver and my driver were racing each other. The road had just been paved and the shoulder was loose gravel, so when Pat's driver applied their brakes and the passenger side of the car was over the line on the right side of the number 2 lane, the passenger tires kept spinning while the driver's side locked up, spinning the car into an oncoming pickup. The oncoming driver was hospitalized and recovered. Pat's driver broke a femur, was convicted, sentenced to home detention, but was late to get home from high school one day, which tripped the ankle monitor and the driver did 30 days. The 3 kids in the back had to be extracted by the jaws of life. Broke some bones and got an insurance settlement. However, I don't think I would have passed away if I got shotgun. He would have left 15 seconds earlier and we wouldn't have hit that oncoming pickup. Or maybe we would have. Story 2. Not me, but I had a field service engineer working on one of my big robotic liquid handlers. He decided to bypass the safety pin that prevents the heads from moving while the cover is open. Well, he had a diagnostic program queued up on the computer. What he didn't know was that the instant he reinserted the safety pin, the machine would execute the queued instructions and start moving. And he had a hand inside it right in the danger zone. I grabbed his shoulder and yanked his hand out an instant before it was crushed. He stopped ignoring me when I told him to stop bypassing safety lockouts to save a few minutes. Standard operating procedure is standard for a reason. Story 3. Think I saved a baby's life once. It was in a city center, crossing a main road with a whole bunch of other people. The dad was pulling the pram behind him onto the pavement while he texted on his phone, and the idiot didn't realize he'd left the pram, just there on the road while he himself was on the pavement. Everyone kinda ignored it while the traffic lights kept that section of road clear, but then the lights changed and the idiot still hadn't looked up from his phone while a huge double-decker was bearing down on his offspring. Out of the whole crowd, I was the only one to push forward and pull the pram onto the pavement. The complete imbecile gave a grunt of surprise and dropped his phone as the bus whooshed past as he realized he'd utterly failed in his parenting responsibilities, which was some consolation. I hope it shattered. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Some people don't deserve to be parents. Story 4. Well, about 15 years ago, I dated a guy for less than a year. It was an awful, cruel relationship, and I was happy to get out of it when I did. About 8 to 9 years ago, I saw him in the news. He harmed his girlfriend. He then kept her for a month or so before he was caught. Not a serial terminator, but he dated a criminal. He was not a terminator at the time. We were young and met on a dating website. He went to my high school, but graduated a few years before me. The first month was okay. Then he changed. We had a huge fight one time because he said something silly. I don't even remember what it was, but I playfully threw a pillow at him. He immediately flipped out, punched a hole in my door, and told me he'd make it so I would never have anything to come back to. Another time, he finally got a job. Didn't have one when I met him, and I was paying for everything. After job searching for months, he got one. And it's his first few days at his new job, and all of a sudden, he doesn't want to go in. No reason, he just doesn't feel like it. I tell him he better get to that damn job or he's going to lose it. After a lot of arguing, he gets ready and we both get in the car so I can drive him to work. As I'm driving, it gets more heated and he starts hurting me while I'm at a red light. The red light was right next to a gas station and I pulled in there. I managed to get him off me and I get out of the car and scream, "What the heck?" "I'm sorry, I blacked out. You just angered me so much. I told you I didn't want to go to work." The relationship lasted less than a year. He cheated on me with some girl, and for the first and only time in my life, I was glad someone was cheating on me. He can go live with her and be someone else's problem now. 10 years later, when I saw him on the news, I felt really bad for that thought. He had handcuffed his then-girlfriend, who had just had his baby, to the bed and harmed her. Thought she'd cheated on him. He kept her and lived with her for a month in their apartment. Eventually, the smell tipped some people off, along with his girlfriend not being seen by family in a bit. The baby was okay, though, and was taken in by the girl's family. He went on the run, but was later caught and is currently in prison. No news article, though. I posted a news article with it before and got banned. Hopefully with all the info I gave you, plus someone guessed the state below, you can find it for yourself so I don't get banned again for posting personal information by posting a public news article. LOL. Story 5. Not my story, but a girl I knew had had a few drinks and decided to hitchhike home, a town about 40 minutes away from the one she'd been drinking in. Note, it is very common for people to hitchhike in this area. She gets picked up by a car of guys. All seems fine until she points out they can drop her off just up ahead and they keep driving. She had the instant sober feeling. She plays it off like she's clueless and totally down to keep hanging out with them. acting like she's very intoxicated. Meanwhile, they're back in a more forested area of the highway. Then she fakes dry heaves and says she's about to retch, really putting on a show so they stop to let her out. She books it into the bushes and just doesn't look back until she's safe. Those are some crazy survival instincts right there. Story 6. My girlfriend and I were going to see Cats, the movie. Our Uber pulls up and straight away we notice something about the driver. To this day, we can't articulate what it was, other than to say he just felt off. We got into the car, already hesitating and a touch anxious. He looks at us in the rearview mirror and makes a comment like, "Two lovely ladies in my car tonight," or some weird crap. A few minutes in, he makes another innuendo comment about riding with him. My friend notices the handle of a knife just poking out of the side of his jacket. She says, "Hey, can we stop at 7-Eleven? We need to grab a Gatorade real quick." So we go in and refuse to come back out. We're considering whether to call the police or not. It was so creepy, but what would we say? Some dude was creepy to us. And while we're hesitating, he winds down his window, brandishes the hunting knife at both of us, screams something about devil women, and then just tears it out of the parking lot. To this day, my girlfriend and I are so thankful that we got out of that Uber. Otherwise, we would have made it to the movies in time and we would have seen Cats. God forbid you would have seen Cats. Story 7. A few years ago, I had pneumonia, but my whole family insisted that it was just post-nasal drip, which runs in the family. After a week or two, I woke up in the middle of the night when I couldn't feel my arm. After I got to the ER, the doctor said it was the worst he'd ever seen, and he was surprised it wasn't gone. I had 3 pounds of mucus cut out of my lungs and another 2 weeks in the hospital siphoning out the rest. For 3 months afterwards, I could barely walk half a mile without starting to pass out, and I still can't run for more than 200 to 300 yards without collapsing. Story 8. My high school sweetheart and fiancé was my bullet. He ghosted me out of nowhere, no explanation, just gone. So needless to say, no wedding. I sent the ring back to his mom because I didn't want it and was mad. I go on to live a great life. Find a wonderful guy and we have been happily married for 21 years. 25 years later, I found out that my old flame had been arrested for solicitation, texting girls, possession of inappropriate stuff, and many charges. Apparently, Mr. Big Man in his community was arrested in a sting operation after this 12-year-old girl's parents found a whole series of texts and had found that he set up a romantic hotel room get-together for them. Police pretended to be her and he was caught in the parking lot of the hotel. Even better, he was married to the same chick he was apparently seeing while we were together and had a couple of kids, all around the same age of his victims. Yeah, before finding this all out, I regretted for a long time that we didn't work. After finding out this had been going on for at least 20 years, I was rather glad I got ghosted. Never been so glad to dodge a bullet. Holy crap, they should make this a movie. Story 9. Around 30,000 pounds. I was driving with my wife in town one snowy evening and we had pulled up to a stoplight. He happened to glance up at the rearview mirror and saw a city bus heading towards us and rotating sideways. I hit the gas and pulled ahead into the intersection and left into the turning lane, and less than a second later, the bus went sliding right through where our car was. They came to a stop on the other side of the intersection and fortunately didn't hit anything, but 1 second or 2 feet difference and we would have had some nice spinal injuries. Story 10. Hubs, my sister, and I were hanging out around my parents' house on a very boring 4th of July. We decided to watch my husband's new car sitting in the driveway because it was hot out and an excuse to play in the hose. We were literally walking out the front door and I said, we should eat lunch before we get all wet and stuff. And everyone agreed, so we turned around and went back inside. I was warming up something in the microwave, the Hot Pocket, I think, and all of a sudden I heard the loudest bang I think I've ever heard, from the direction of the front door. Hubs and I look at each other, wide-eyed, and run outside. I was greeted by the back end of a Crown Vic, smoking something fierce, plowed into the tree in the middle of our yard. For a split second, I was just stunned, then screamed to my sister inside to call 911. I looked over to the driveway at the car we'd been planning to wash just 5 minutes ago. Totaled. Completely totaled. Brand new 2011 G6. Destroyed. Guy hit it so hard it did a complete 90-degree turn across the driveway. He actually hit it so hard it ended up ricocheting and hitting the other cars in the driveway, mauling 2 other cars. Yard was screwed. Crown Vic was screwed. Tree was screwed. We immediately assumed it was intoxicated driving, being the 4th and all. I went over to the driver's side and found a very old man, very bewildered, unable to comprehend what I was saying but conscious. I'll never forget the look he gave me. Confused, helpless, scared. I was on the line with the paramedics as they sent over the ambulances and tried my best to follow their instructions. My sister was only 14 at the time, so I handled the call. Turns out the dude was diabetic and had passed out behind the wheel due to low sugar. Hit the gas pedal with his weight as he passed out and was plowing down a residential street at about 65 miles per hour. He jumped the curb, drove down the sidewalk past another house, then slammed into my husband's car and subsequently the tree. If he had been anywhere near that yard or driveway, I have no doubt one or all of us would have been seriously injured. It was sheer dumb luck and timing that saved us. Huge bullet dodged. Or should I say, a huge car dodged. Story 11. My dad was a truck driver in the oil field in Canada. He worked a lot of long hours every single day, so on weekends he would bring me and my younger brother to some of his jobs. We were on location, and my little brother, 3 years, and me, 10 years, were waiting for him playing in the cab of the truck. My little brother opened the passenger door and my little arms closed it. Job's done. We start our trek home, going about 35 kilometers per hour, and the door flies open and I get sucked out of the truck. I remember doing about 10 backflips as he tumbled out, hitting the ground on my back a few times and rolling my way to a stop. I stood up before the truck was even stopped in absolute shock. Next thing I saw, my dad looking for me and he burst into tears. First time I ever seen him cry. I'm 33 now and he still won't talk to me about it. Luckily, the rig was in a farmer's field. When we were leaving, I landed on softer dirt. Not a single scratch on me. Dad thought he ran over me with a trailer. Don't think we ever went to work with Dad again. I work for the company now. Oh, the trauma it gave that man. God bless him. Story 12. I found a new job. The boss seemed nice in the interview. Started working, and right from the start, people weren't comfortable talking about the job, and you could literally smell the fear. Also, there was very little work to do. My direct colleague was sick, and they wouldn't give me her phone number. I wanted to discuss a few things or strategies to move forward, but everyone kept dodging giving me her number. After 2 days, I found I had a headache going there, which got worse during the day, so I quit. Company doesn't exist anymore. I guess you can't run a job agency without customers and everybody just pretending to work. Story 13. So about 20-something years ago, I was on my way to an interview through a suburb of Washington, D.C. That particular road has you driving at a not-so-slow speed, with no shoulders and sidewalks with many pedestrians. A woman standing on the sidewalk stepped backward into the roadway just as I was approaching. Slammed on the brakes, honked, and she turned slightly. I stop and get out, and she's rolling around clutching her foot, wailing about her foot getting rolled over. My heart is hammering. I have no idea how much trouble I'm in, and my brain is ticking away at the time of the interview. Pedestrians kept coming up to her to tell her that they saw me run over her foot. Duh, of course you did. After a few minutes of this, the woman stood up, said, "Merry Christmas." It was definitely nowhere near Christmas, and walked away through the people standing there. I took my dodged bullet with much appreciation, got in my car, and drove away. I didn't get the job for what it's worth, but a couple of inches in my life could have changed for the worse in so many ways. Dude, you gave that poor old lady a shock. Story 14. 4 Christmases ago, I was in Mexico with Mom, Dad, and brother doing some last-minute shopping at the local Walmart. We finished our shopping and went to the car. As soon as we were leaving, 2 trucks stopped right in front of the main Walmart entrance. They were a cartel and were hunting for the son of one of the opposing cartel's main dudes. They fired a freaking bazooka. I think they got the guy, and then bullets started flying everywhere. My dad was driving, he hit the gas, we almost crashed because there was panic everywhere and we had a red light. The military showed up while we were driving away and a chase ensued. Luckily, they were close to the house where we were staying and made it back quite fast. Heard gunshots for the next 3 hours. Dodged some bullets and even a missile that day. Man, I was waiting for the "and then I woke up" line. But holy crap. Story 15. My ex-husband. He told me he wanted a divorce, but I didn't. I agreed to work on a relationship and give it a few months. We set a date and went to work, and he acted like things were changing and he wasn't going to leave. He started encouraging me to take out debt and spend money out of our savings, etc. Turns out that he was lying to me and had every intention of leaving on the date we set and crushing me emotionally so I'd hate him forever. And was encouraging me to take out debt since it was all in my name and he'd get half the savings. I only found his little scheme because he gave me his Apple Watch that we just purchased while he was working on something, and I read his messages because I had a feeling something wasn't quite right. For those of you that don't know, if you delete a message on your phone, it doesn't automatically delete from your Apple Watch. I found a few hundred messages to his best friend and Mom talking about how much better he could do than me. He had feelings for a coworker and knew she wanted him too. Spoiler alert, she didn't. She's just a nice lady. He hated me and that was the worst decision he'd ever made. Never really had feelings for me anyway, etc. It was a bunch of savage, cruel crap. Finding it rocked me to my core. I'd never imagined anyone could hate me like that, let alone someone I was married to. This happened like 2 weeks after he'd initially sat me down to talk. We were in public and I cried after finding the messages. I went up to him, held up his watch, and quietly told him I knew his plans and to find a different ride home. His smile dropped, and the color drained from his face so quickly. I went straight home, and by the time he arrived, I'd packed him a bag of essentials, left it on the doorstep, and called both his mom and best friend to let them know he'd been needing a place to stay. He was crying, and we hashed it out on the steps, which wasn't my proudest moment. I won't lie, though. To see him cry after what he had said about me was so satisfying. The next day, I had the locks changed. By the end of the day after that, I had all of his crap packed and waiting neatly in the living room for him to pick up. By the end of that month, I'd filed for divorce, and we were officially and legally done forever. He's a freaking loser, and I absolutely dodged a bullet. It's been a long road to rebuild my trust in people, though. I'm definitely better off having gone through the whole situation, and while looking back, it was the best thing that could have happened. It absolutely sucked to go through. Well, we all have our character development arcs. Story 16. My great-grandfather was in the Merchant Navy in the war. He was in the engine room at the bottom of the ship, and his friend came down to take over the shift early. Minutes later, a torpedo struck, and everyone at the bottom of the ship couldn't escape and passed away. My great-grandfather would have been one of them otherwise. Then he was in the sea for a while and happened to be picked up by some Portuguese fisherman who saved him. Then, all part of the same tale, he escaped, passing away again. He was meant to be on a flight back to the UK, but got kicked off at the last minute to be replaced by VIPs. That plane got shot down and everyone passed away in it. Miss you, great-grandpa. Man was allergic to death. Jeez. Story 17. Years ago, I lived in Vancouver and liked to go for long walks. Beautiful city to do so. I was heading to a friend's place first to drop something off and cut through a neighborhood with a lot of Southeast Asian immigrants. The ones I got to talk to were mostly from Vietnam. I was aware of a van behind me, but it was midday and there were people out, so it was only a passing thought. A lady was working in her garden, and as I approached her house, she started to look behind me. Then she came out onto the sidewalk and started talking to me in her native language. I understood none of it, but her body language was agitated. She kept gesturing to me to come with her up their walkway. As I look behind me, I see 3 men getting out of the van, which is now parked just behind me. At this point, the woman had a good grip on my arm and has dragged me almost to her porch. She kept talking to me and pointing to stuff in her garden, and I just listened, nodded, and kept a good eye on the men and van. I don't remember how long we were there, but the men finally left. Both myself and the woman let out huge sighs of relief. She then patted me on the arm, said something, and then went back to her gardening. I booted it to my friend's house. On the news the next day was a story of a woman who was taken and harmed. The victim was grabbed on the next street over from the woman's house, not long after my encounter with her, by 5 men in a van. The men were distinctive, and the description of the men and van fit the ones I'd seen. That woman saved me from something horrible, and I'm forever thankful. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 18. I do a road safety show for school kids, and back when the school started opening up again, my manager booked me in for this one school. First one since the outbreak. The day before, I just got a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach about it. I've got anxiety issues, so I didn't think much of it, but the anxiety became overwhelming by lunchtime, and I decided to call my manager and cancel. She understood and tried to get one of the other employees in to cover for me, but they were all busy, and thank God they were, because I heard on the news a few days that a kid at that school had come to school sick and given them to a bunch of his classmates. The class I was scheduled to do the show for. I'm high risk, so getting sick for me would have had a good chance of ending me, so really dodged a bullet there. We decided after that little scare to give it another month or so before we actually resumed again. Story 19. I met someone through a dumpster fire of a Skype chat group. She basically said the others were losers, but hey, let's be friends. A week or so later, she asked me out. I said no, but she laid the pressure on thick, begging me, whining, saying it would mean the world to her. I decided there was no harm in trying. Day 3, she said she loved me. I panicked, set it back, not sure what standard protocol was, as this was my first relationship. On day 4, I realized I wasn't going to get feelings anytime soon and broke things off. She threatened to end it all. I left anyway. A few days later, she sends a previous ex of hers to apologize on her behalf. The ex and I discuss what happened, and the ex tells me the same thing happened to her. Only she fell for it and things got bad. The whole Skype group knew, but they thought our mutual partner had gotten better since then. Last I heard, she finally got kicked from the group after years of preying on insecure newcomers. She was collecting y'all like Pokemon. Story 20. Was dating this guy for 4 years, from my 16s to 20s. We were looking to buy an apartment and to get married when he broke up with me. He said he was in love with somebody else because she has a nice body. He always called me fatty and how much weight I gained, and when I told him I was going to lose weight if he would go grow some muscles at the gym, he said that I was the only one who needed to work out. Anyway, I was so devastated I cried for so long. It was awful. Fast forward 5 years. Nothing in my life is bad, but nothing is good. Just same old, same old. I found an exchange program that I could actually afford. I moved from Brazil to the US. I traveled to so many places. I proved myself so brave. I discovered so much about myself, and then I meet the love of my life. He was here, waiting for me. We're happily married, building our life together, and he treats me with respect, love, like a queen. We have a puppy now, and we're planning for the future, and I'm just so happy. I can't believe I almost didn't have this in him. Story 21. Last year, I was cut from the AA hockey team that I usually played on every year because of a scheduling mishap with my lacrosse team tournament, so I ended up playing A that year. That year, a girl gave almost everyone the flu. They didn't make it to provincials, cities, or even make it past semis in a tournament. Also, the 3 imports, really good players from different leagues invited to play, made everyone in the team season hell because of their entitled attitude and costing games by taking stupid penalties. Well, I had a fun team experience with a group of great girls. Story 22. I'm often at odds with my mom. She is very self-absorbed and doesn't make sense when she rambles about nothing for a lot of the time she speaks. She gets it from her mom. They share some kind of voodoo gift of gab with no upside. So when she had a 3 a.m. chat with me at age 25 about my girlfriend of 3 years and the relationship was pretty much going to be my one and only to the end, I was very surprised when she suddenly started making some very solid points about how my girlfriend was basically an adult child and rather than having a partner, I was basically raising a daughter. Sure enough, after that I saw my relationship a lot more clearly. Things went off the rails after that and I made the decision to dump her. Then crap got crazy. This girl stalked me at my job, left me letters both in my house and at work, texted and emailed me. It flip-flopped violently between threats to tell everyone embarrassing things about me to pleads to take her back. On a whim, she then joined the army and bragged to me about how she would become part of something greater than I ever could be. The communications petered out, but I remember the last text I got from her a few months later was that she was getting married, that day, to a guy she met in the army and who was so much better than I could ever be. Thanks, Mom. You adopted me, you supported me, and you bailed me out of the worst mistake I could have ever made. Mother knows best, or however that song goes. Story 23. My first husband and I were separated. He showed up at my apartment building unannounced, and someone let him in because they recognized him from when he lived there. I wanted to come upstairs, but I met him in the lobby instead. There were cameras and other people. He'd never been violent towards me, but it didn't feel right to allow him into my space. He asked me to go for a drive with him, and I refused. He offered to help him get help, mental health issues that he refused to treat. He declined and drove away. He was missing for a few days, but turned up several states away visiting a friend. A few days after that, he ended it all using a handgun. We found out later that he'd purchased the gun here and headed straight out of town when I refused to get in the car with him. To this day, I'm thankful that I never got in that car with him. He never even talked about buying a gun before. I had no idea he was armed. Who knows what would have happened? You would have had front row seats. Or seat. Story 24. I have a condition that would potentially make the lockdown life-threatening. At the beginning of the semester, one of my roommates came back from the summer and we all hung out in our living room with masks on. That night I was going to offer my roommate to smoke with me. Then, at the last minute, thought better of it, told myself I would ask them once we both got back negative tests. The next morning I woke up to them calling, crying. They tested positive. Luckily they've recovered, but I certainly would have caught it if we smoked together. Story 25. I was living in Paris during the fall of 2015 for my semester study abroad in college. My apartment was right by Republic, and every Friday night I had a standing reservation at La Petite Cambodge, a local Cambodian restaurant that had the best wake-up at 2 a.m. dream-worthy noodles. Cue November 11th. My best friend who was studying in Scotland calls me, crying that they'd been dumped and was hoping I could come for the weekend. I was a little reluctant because I had wanted to go to the concert at the Bataclan that Friday, but hadn't got my tickets yet, so said sure and booked a flight for that Friday afternoon, November 13th. When I landed and made it to their apartment after we went out to dinner, I turned on my phone to hundreds of messages. Turns out both La Petite Cambodge and the Bataclan had been targeted by and there were more hits going on in my neighborhood. The best thing my friend X did was dump them. Otherwise, I would have been either at dinner or a concert and more than likely wouldn't have been there to write this. Story 26. My ex-husband and I started talking about having kids. Well, at the time I was on that horrible birth control called Yaz. Remember the class action? Long story short, it made things a little difficult getting pregnant. Fast forward to a few months later and I found some girl's garments in our apartment, moved out and started the divorce. Sure enough, he knocked up his girlfriend and ditched her when their kid was only a year old. The guy was such a loser. Dodged a bullet in that one. Story 27. I was a young dev team manager at a software company. One contract employee had been very sporadic in his hours, which was fine at first, but it started turning into not showing up at all and still logging hours. I tried reaching out to him repeatedly to ask if he was okay or whatever, but never got a response. Worked with his agency to have him removed. We boxed his belongings and the agency rep took them to his office. About a week later, I got a call from this guy. He's in the parking garage and his car key won't let him enter. I tell him I'm coming down to chat and head immediately down the elevator to the parking garage where he is. As I walk out the door, I hear the lock click behind me. It occurs to me that I am about to tell this guy he's been fired. He's much bigger than me, and then the fear set in. I put on my best stay cool face and just talked to him as respectfully as I could. I explained that I had not seen him in days, nor had I been able to get a hold of him, so I had to terminate him. I told him that his agency rep had all his belongings from his office and that I would need his card key back so I could turn it into security. There was a short pause. He shrugged and apologized to me, gave me his card key, and we said goodbye. I'm lucky he was willing to take the honest approach and not get angry. In my experience, most big dudes are actually gentle giants. In my experience, but, Story 28. Leaving or getting kicked out of my group of friends in high school that eventually became weeaboos. My best friend since elementary school became a manipulative schmuck and backstabbed me our sophomore year. I knew our friendship was on the rocks since they kept excluding me and made fun of anything I was interested in that wasn't whatever anime was popular in the early 10s. The moment I knew I probably wasn't going to stay friends with them was the last time we all were hanging out, and I was excited about getting my driver's license and trying to talk about cars. They all laughed at me for wanting to drive and went back to watching what I would later find out was Naruto Yaoi. And my friend spread a rumor that I was gay to try and increase his chances with a girl in our group. No one really believed it, thankfully, but I had it and became a loner for the rest of high school. Good thing, too, because they leaned heavily into the weeaboo thing not long after, and I mean really into it. Dressing up stupid, singing anime songs, using broken Japanese and acting like the people you read about online. Everyone thought they were weird, and after high school, few of them have to yet move on and amount to anything. You were just being a baka. Story 29. I was running late for class one day and had to park in a different parking lot. Because of that, instead of walking to campus, I took a shuttle, since this lot was further away. After class, a friend of mine who I would have typically walked back to the parking lot with got hit by a stray bullet in the shoulder while walking back to his car, in the parking lot that he would have been in if I was on time. He had to have surgery and there was a short recovery period, but he was fine. I have a tendency to think that had I been walking with him, I could have gotten hit or he could have been hit in a different spot. It wasn't far from causing major damage to begin with, or our other friend with a clotting disorder could have been hit or something worse. Story 30. New Year's Eve 2013. I met a girl at a party. She asked me if I wanted to go to a different party with her. I hopped in her car. I didn't realize how intoxicated she was until we started driving around. I asked her to stop the car. She didn't. I ended up exiting the vehicle at about 20 miles per hour. I saw her 4 months later by happenstance. She had a huge boot in her leg and crutches. That night, she crashed her car into a cop car. She showed me the pictures. The passenger side where it would have been sitting was completely crushed in. If I had survived, I would have lost both my legs. She was so belligerently intoxicated that night that she actually ended up fighting the police. She didn't stop when I asked her to because she was so belligerently intoxicated. Story 31. My first serious boyfriend at 14. He would tell me that at night he could transform into a wolf and materialize in the corner of my room and guard me while I slept. I had crap self-esteem, so I tried not to think too much about that crazy crap. I also would listen to him brag about his intimate conquests. He was 18 and trying not to come off jealous. He would also try to pressure me to do intimate things with him, even though it scared me. He also wanted me to get engaged to him and would send me letters with his mess all over the pages. Long story short, it turns out all the women he experimented with in various corn-like scenarios was his own sister. I dumped him in a panic. He tried making me feel like I was just immature and everyone experimented with their siblings. He ended up getting imprisoned shortly after for what he confessed to me. I am so glad he's in jail. Story 32. Definitely not on the same level as some here, but I dated my first girlfriend for 5 years, from 17 to 22. From very early on, she always told me she was unhappy at home and wanted to move out. Anytime she would get into an argument with her family, she would come to me and say, "Okay, we need to move in together now." The longer I was with her, the more and more it went from that to, "Why haven't you found us a place? The more I suffer, the more it's on you for delaying this." Meanwhile, I was a teenager and then in my early 20s, working part-time and going through university and trying to explain that it wasn't feasible for us or affordable. Came to a head when her friend offered us a room in her student house and she just said we're taking it without asking me. This room was in a house with her friend and all her university sports teammates. It was in a town over an hour away by car, which I didn't own at the time, in one of the most expensive cities in the country to live. So I'd be a brand new university grad, have to quit my job, move into a single room of student housing with strangers with an extremely volatile partner, away from my friends, family, and whole life, really. Basically, I finally put my foot down and said no. She launched into a 4-day-long cruel tirade, which led to me finally ending the relationship. It was after I broke up with her that I realized how cruel she really was and everything I had endured. Not even a full year later, I got my first full-time job, which, over 5 years later, has led to 2 promotions and a comfortable living. Staying in this town led me to meet my current partner, who I now live with, and can't imagine my life without. When I look at that one moment, one decision that is the most literal definition of choosing which path in the fork in the road to take, making the decision to say, no, I'm not doing that. At that moment is the closest I'll ever come to dodging literal bullets like Neo from the Matrix. Yep, that was the biggest bullet dodged. Story 33. Went to a Walmart with two friends and saw a girl that I liked the look of. She actually came to me first, and I'm nothing special, so this surprised me a little bit, but I began having a conversation with her. Got her snap, and then straight after, one of my friends that I was with came around the aisle and said, "Dude, come on, we don't want to lose you." And that girl responded to him saying, "If you see us talking, leave us alone, you ugly mother trucker." To which my friend responded, "I'm sorry, witch." And then I had to tell him to shut up, and I said goodbye to the girl. As soon as I turned out of that aisle with my friend, I removed her as a friend, leaving her pending whenever she texted me. A massive red flag is not having respect for others. Funniest part is, we weren't even talking when my friend came for me. I just accepted her friend request, so he had every right to talk without getting her mad. Story 34. Me and a friend were bartenders years ago. There was this absolutely beautiful woman that always came in that we clicked with, but she was for the longest time dating what can only be described as a thug. A couple months passed and they didn't come around, and I'm off my birthday weekend and run into her. She was out celebrating being single with a few friends. Our parties merged and we hit it off. Pretty much spent all weekend together, but both realized outside of mutual attraction there wasn't much there between us. I told my buddy, and he asked if it was cool if he asked her out. I was like, go for it. Around their second date, they were leaving a restaurant when my buddy was at twice in the back, and she was at by the thug ex. She passed away, the thug was caught, and my buddy has permanent nerve damage, but survived. Story 35. Not a literal bullet, but a giant tree branch. I was sitting on a blanket in the quad area of a college. It's like a park. I saw some guys playing frisbee and decided to like to watch them, so I moved my blanket a little bit closer. Is that creepy? I was only 16. Moments later, a large branch snapped off a tree and fell in the exact spot where I had just been sitting. And I went and laid under the branch and pretended to pass away while my friend took this photo as proof of my almost passing. Thanks, frisbee guys. Well, I guess, anyway. Story 36. When I was in college, I had a friend, Sally, who adopted a dog, hoping to get it approved by an ESA. When it wasn't, she scrambled to anyone she could give the dog to until she came up with a new plan. She refused to give it back to the shelter or to someone she didn't know. I told her I couldn't take the dog in, even though she offered to pay half the pet fee from my apartment. I recommended my friend Casey, and she took the dog in instead, and Sally said she'd routinely walk the dog, provide supplies, and pay half the $200 pet fee within the week, while looking for a permanent solution. She provided the supplies, but didn't hold up on the rest of the promise. For one, she kept promising to pay soon, but kept making excuses because she was always strapped for cash. On top of that, she gave up searching for alternate housing for the dog a week after the deal was made because I only want to give the dog to someone I know. She acted as if Casey would be the permanent owner. Sally also got busy and couldn't always walk the dog, so the dog would have to mess all over Casey's apartment, which she had to clean up. She had college classes, social commitments, her Air Force duties, and her own personal issues to deal with, and it was hard on her. But she still refused to give up and even tried getting the dog approved as her ESA, but it never came through. The dog was a sweetheart and very loving, but it's still difficult to handle a dog on top of everything else. 2 weeks later, the apartment complex found the dog during an inspection and immediately told Casey that the dog had to go within the next day or she'd be fined. She's lucky she wasn't given anything worse. Sally got angry at Casey, blaming her for the dog getting taken and saying that she now had to find a solution immediately because she didn't have one ready. Casey was horrified and felt so guilty about it. I often think how if I had been in that position, I would have barely survived the first week. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.